"Pretend you're my wife," the millionaire doctor whispered, but his secret condition left her frozen. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character, Emily Bennett. Emily had always lived a quiet, unassuming life in the bustling city of New York. A high school teacher by day and a part-time writer by night, she never expected her life to take a turn so drastically. Everything changed when she met Dr. Alexander Hunter, a renowned millionaire doctor with a reputation that preceded him. His sharp jawline and icy blue eyes were enough to make anyone pause, but Emily wasn't the type to be easily impressed by wealth or status. Yet, when fate intervened, she found herself in a situation that would change her life forever. It all started when Dr. Hunter approached her at a charity event. "Emily, I need your help," he said, his voice low and serious, almost pleading. "I need you to pretend to be my wife for the next 2 months." His request was as strange as it was intriguing. Emily, taken aback, hesitated before responding. "Excuse me. It's complicated," he continued, "but I promise, it won't be as bad as it sounds. There's something I need to handle, and your presence will make it easier. Just pretend to be my wife. In return, I'll make sure you're compensated generously." Emily looked at him, trying to read his face. Was he serious? But then she saw the desperation in his eyes, and something about his vulnerability made her pause. She had no idea what kind of game he was playing, but the promise of financial security, combined with his calm demeanor, made it hard to refuse. "All right," she said, "but only because you seem to really need this." That was how it started. Emily moved into his luxurious penthouse apartment, where they would share the facade of a happy married couple. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. The apartment was pristine, the meals were gourmet, and the lifestyle was beyond anything Emily had ever experienced. But something felt off. Dr. Hunter was distant. He was courteous, professional, but there was a wall between them that she couldn't penetrate. The days passed in a blur of events, dinners, and social gatherings. Emily began to feel more like a trophy wife than a real partner. The role she was playing felt hollow, and as the days went on, she started to question her decision. What was really going on behind the scenes? Why was Dr. Hunter so guarded? And why did it seem like he was hiding something? It wasn't until one fateful night that Emily would discover the truth, a truth that would change everything. Emily had been living in Dr. Alexander Hunter's penthouse for 2 weeks now. It was a strange new life for her. The first few days had been a whirlwind of parties, gala dinners, and high society events, all filled with laughter and extravagant gestures. But behind the glamour and elegance, something felt off. Dr. Hunter kept his distance, a wall of professionalism and reserve that Emily couldn't quite break through. He was a man of few words, and when he did speak, it was usually about work, his successful practice, his philanthropic efforts, or his charity work. The moments when he looked at her with something more than a casual glance were rare, and even those moments felt fleeting. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to his request than he was letting on. It wasn't just about appearances. Something deeper was hidden beneath the surface. One evening, Emily was standing in the kitchen preparing dinner when she saw Dr. Hunter walk into the room. He seemed more tense than usual, his usually composed demeanor giving way to something more fragile. His eyes, typically cold and detached, were clouded with a storm of emotion. "Emily," he began, his voice tight. "I need to talk to you." She turned to face him, setting down the knife she was holding. "What is it, Alex?" she asked, using the nickname he'd told her to call him. The use of his first name felt strange, yet it also felt intimate. "I'm not the man you think I am," he said, taking a step closer. The words hung in the air, and Emily felt a knot form in her stomach. "What do you mean?" she asked, her Voice barely a whisper. Dr. Hunter's expression softened, but only slightly. There's something you don't know about me, something I've kept hidden for a long time. It's why I needed you to pretend to be my wife. Emily's heart began to race. She had been expecting something, but this wasn't what she had imagined. Was he confessing to something criminal? Or was this just another one of his games? What is it? She asked again, her curiosity piqued but her guard still up. Dr. Hunter looked away, his gaze darkening. I'm sick, Emily, he finally confessed, his voice strained with emotion. I've been diagnosed with a rare condition, and it's not something I can cure. I don't want anyone to know. Not my colleagues, not my family, and especially not the public. That's why I asked you to pretend to be my wife. I needed someone to fill the role, someone who could keep up appearances and not ask questions. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She stood there, frozen, her mind racing to process what he had just said. A rare condition? What did that even mean? How serious was it? And why had he kept it a secret for so long? How long have you known? She asked quietly, still trying to make sense of the revelation. For almost a year, he replied, his voice barely audible. It's been getting worse, and I can't keep up the charade forever. But I don't want anyone to pity me, Emily. I don't want to be treated like some fragile thing. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. This was too much to process, but at the same time, she couldn't deny the sympathy that began to swell in her chest. She had never seen Dr. Hunter vulnerable like this, and it made him seem more human, more real. But it also made her question everything. What did this mean for their arrangement? For their so-called marriage? Could she continue pretending when the man she had been pretending with was hiding something so monumental? Emily didn't know what to say, so she simply nodded, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. The next few days passed in a blur of confusion and reflection. She found herself looking at Dr. Hunter with a new sense of understanding, though she couldn't shake the feeling that things would never be the same between them. She wasn't sure where this would lead, but she knew one thing, her life had just become far more complicated. The next few days were a blur of emotions for Emily. After Dr. Hunter's revelation, she had spent countless hours pacing through the sleek, modern halls of his penthouse, trying to wrap her mind around what he had said. A rare condition. The weight of his confession hung heavily in the air, like an unspoken promise of things to come. Emily had always known that people like Dr. Hunter were hard to read, cold, distant, almost like they existed in a world of their own. But now, she realized there was so much more to him than she had ever imagined. She had never seen him vulnerable before, and it made her question everything about their arrangement. She hadn't known how to respond when he told her about his illness. It felt as though the world had shifted on its axis. How was she supposed to continue pretending to be his wife when the man she was sharing a life with was hiding such a deep, personal secret? That night, she lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The city lights outside her window twinkled like 1,000 stars, but in the stillness of the room, Emily felt utterly alone. Her thoughts kept racing. What was her role in all of this? She had agreed to help him, to pretend to be his wife for appearance's sake, but now it felt like so much more. She was no longer just an actor in a game of make-believe. She was tied to this man in a way she hadn't expected. As the days passed, Emily noticed the subtle changes in Dr. Hunter. There was something different about him now, something less guarded. He still kept his distance emotionally, but his eyes seemed softer, his posture less rigid. When they were in public, he was still the same composed, confident doctor everyone knew, but when they were alone, there was a tenderness in the way he spoke to her. It was as if he was trying to let her in, but was unsure of how much to share. Emily wasn't sure how to handle the new dynamics between them. She had agreed to this charade, but it was starting to feel like it was becoming real, too. Real. One evening, after a quiet dinner in the penthouse, she found herself standing in the kitchen again, cleaning up. Dr. Hunter approached her, this time without the usual air of authority. His face was softer, tired, and there was something almost vulnerable in his eyes. Emily, he started, but then he trailed off, running a hand through his hair. I'm sorry for springing this all on you. I never wanted you to feel like you were trapped in this role. I didn't expect you to care this much. I just didn't know how to deal with it on my own. Emily paused, setting down the dish she had been washing. She turned to face him, taking in his weary expression. You don't have to apologize, she said quietly. I agree to this. I knew there would be complications. She hesitated for a moment, then added, but, Alex, you don't have to go through this alone. I'm here for you, whether this is just for show or not. His eyes softened, and for the first time, Emily saw the flicker of something genuine, something real, in his gaze. He stepped closer, his hand brushing against hers as he reached for the dish towel. I didn't expect this from you, he said, his voice low. But I'm glad you're here. I don't want to burden you, but I don't want to pretend anymore either. Emily's heart skipped a beat as the weight of his words settled in. This was more than just a contract now. It was more than just an arrangement between two strangers. She didn't know where this would lead, but she knew that whatever happened, she couldn't go back to pretending. Something had changed. And now, as the days turned into weeks, Emily felt herself drawn closer to the man she had once thought she understood, only to realize that the more she learned, the less she truly knew. Emily had never imagined that her life would become entangled with someone like Dr. Alexander Hunter. What had started as a simple request to play a role, to pretend to be his wife for a few months, had slowly turned into something far more complex. The feelings she had tried so hard to suppress were starting to surface, and no matter how much she tried to deny them, they were there. Each day, Emily found herself caring for Alex in ways she hadn't anticipated. She noticed the way his shoulders slumped when he thought no one was looking, the way his eyes seemed to lose their sharp edge whenever he was alone with her. It was as if he was allowing himself to be human again, to show her a side of himself that was rarely, if ever, seen by anyone. But with every passing moment, Emily struggled with the weight of the secret he had shared with her. He had told her about his condition, and the more she thought about it, the more she realized how much it affected everything between them. She wanted to be there for him, to support him in any way she could, but the fear of the unknown still lingered. How much time did he have left? Was his condition something that would eventually take him away from her, or was there a chance for a future? The questions ran through her mind day and night. Despite these uncertainties, there were moments, brief, fleeting moments, when she felt like they were on the verge of something real. They had shared quiet evenings together, simple things like reading in silence or eating dinner without the usual formalities. In those moments, it felt like they were more than just a pretend couple. It felt like they were beginning to build something genuine, something that went beyond the act they had been playing. One afternoon, as Emily was sitting by the window, looking out over the city, she heard the familiar sound of Alex's footsteps approaching. He entered the room slowly, as though unsure of what to say. Emily, he said, his voice soft. We need to talk. She turned toward him, a nervous flutter in her chest. What's going on? She asked, trying to hide the anxiety in her tone. I've been thinking a lot about everything, he began. About us. About what this is. And I'm starting to realize that. I don't want to keep pretending anymore. Emily felt her heart skip a beat. Was he going to end their arrangement? Was he finally going to tell her that it was time to go back to their separate lives? But before she could speak, Alex continued. I don't want to be your husband in name only, he said, his eyes searching hers. I don't want to live this lie any longer. But I also know I'm not ready to tell the world about my condition. I can't let anyone know about this yet. It's just too much. Emily took a deep breath, processing his words. For a moment, the silence between them felt heavy, filled with unspoken thoughts and emotions. She wanted to say something, but she wasn't sure what. Her heart was torn between the desire to support him and the fear of what their future might hold. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady but soft. Alex, I don't want to pretend either. But I'm here for you. No matter what happens, I'll be here. We can figure this out together. His gaze softened, and for the first time in weeks, Emily saw a hint of hope in his eyes. It was small, but it was there. And in that moment, she realized that whatever the future held, they would face it together, no longer as actors playing a part, but as two people learning to navigate a reality that neither of them had expected. Days passed, and Emily felt the weight of their new reality settle between them. What had once been a simple arrangement was now something more. She had seen the vulnerability in Alex's eyes, and it had changed everything. No longer could she simply play the role of a wife for the sake of appearances. She was too deeply invested now. She had crossed a line from pretending to being fully present, emotionally entangled in a situation that neither of them had expected. But the question still loomed over her: what did this mean for them moving forward? Alex seemed to be wrestling with the same doubts. The man who had once been so composed, so in control, now showed signs of internal conflict. He would still retreat into his private world, but there were moments when their eyes would meet, and everything else seemed to fade away. It was as if they were no longer pretending. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, the quiet of the room felt heavy, filled with unspoken words. Emily tried to focus on the book she had in her hands, but her mind kept wandering back to the look on Alex's face the day he had opened up to her about his condition. She wasn't sure if she could handle what lay ahead, but the idea of walking away now felt impossible. "Emily!" Alex's voice broke through her thoughts. She turned to face him. "I know this hasn't been easy for you," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "I never wanted to complicate your life. But I also know I can't keep pretending that things are just business as usual. I've started to care about you more than I ever expected." Her heart skipped a beat at his words. She had felt it too, the shift, the connection that had grown between them over time. But hearing him admit it out loud made everything feel real. "Alex, Emily began, but she wasn't sure what to say. Her feelings were tangled, conflicted. She didn't want to make it harder for him, but she couldn't deny the truth any longer. She had fallen for him. "I care about you too," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. The world outside seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of them in that moment of honesty. "I'm scared," Alex confessed quietly, breaking the silence. "I'm scared of what this means. Scared of what will happen when my condition gets worse. I don't want to drag you into that." Emily could see the pain in his eyes, the fear of losing control over his own life. She reached out and took his hand in hers, holding it gently. "You're not dragging me into anything," she said softly. "I'm here because I want to be. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." The sincerity in her voice seemed to reach him, and for the first time in a long while, Alex allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to go through this alone. Over the next few days, their relationship began to shift again. The walls that had once separated them slowly began to crumble, replaced by something more genuine. They spent more time together, not as a couple pretending, but as two people trying to make sense of a complicated situation. Alex still struggled with his diagnosis, the reality of his condition weighing heavily on him. But with Emily by his side, there was a sense of comfort, of peace, that he hadn't felt in a long time. For Emily, the days ahead were uncertain. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't going to turn away from him now. They had come too far, and the connection they had was real. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Emily woke up to the soft light of the morning sun streaming through the window. It had been a week since Alex had opened up to her about his condition, and things between them had shifted. There was no turning back now. The connection they shared had deepened, and Emily knew that their journey was far from over. But with each passing day, the weight of the situation grew heavier. The uncertainty of Alex's health, the unknowns of the future, they all hung in the air like an unspoken tension. It was one of those quiet mornings when everything felt still, yet Emily's mind was racing. She was sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in front of her, when Alex entered the room. His presence was a constant in her life now, yet somehow, he seemed different this morning. There was a quiet determination in the way he walked, a subtle shift in his demeanor. Morning, he said softly, his voice carrying a warmth that hadn't been there in the past. Morning, she replied, offering him a smile. He sat down across from her, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer than usual. I've been thinking, he began, his voice steady but filled with a seriousness that caught her attention. About what we talked about the other day. About not pretending anymore. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected this conversation so soon. Was he ready to take their relationship to the next level, or was he pulling away? I know we both agreed that things can't stay the way they are, he continued. But I also want to make sure that you're ready for what comes next. I don't want to push you into something you're not prepared for. Emily felt a lump form in her throat. Alex, I'm here, she said, her voice firm but gentle. I'm ready for whatever comes next, as long as we're in this together. He nodded slowly, as though her words gave him some measure of reassurance. For a long moment, they sat in silence, both lost in their thoughts. Emily had always prided herself on being independent, on making decisions that were best for her. But with Alex, everything was different. She had allowed herself to care, to open her heart to someone who had once seemed untouchable. And now, she wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew that she didn't want to face it without him. I've been holding back, Alex said, his voice softer now. Because I didn't want you to get hurt. I didn't want to bring you into my mess. But I realize now that I've already brought you into it. And I don't want to let you go. The vulnerability in his voice was like a crack in the armor he had built around himself. Emily's heart swelled with emotion. She reached across the table, her hand resting gently on his. You're not alone in this, Alex. We'll face it together. I promise. He squeezed her hand, his eyes searching hers, as though looking for confirmation. In that moment, Emily felt a sense of peace she hadn't known she needed. They weren't perfect, and they didn't have all the answers. But for the first time in a long time, they were in this together. And that, she realized, was enough. The days ahead were uncertain, but Emily knew one thing for sure: whatever challenges they faced, they would face them side by side. There was no going back, no pretending anymore. It was real, and it was theirs to navigate, together. Weeks went by, and life between Emily and Alex had slowly settled into a new rhythm. They had both adjusted to their new reality, a reality that wasn't defined by pretense or charades, but by the understanding that they were in this together, come what may. There were moments of uncertainty, of course, but those were balanced by the quiet comfort they found in each other's company. Emily had begun to accompany Alex to some of his doctor's appointments. She had seen him at his most vulnerable, sitting in the sterile waiting rooms, his face shadowed with anxiety. It was a side of him she had never seen before, and it made her heart ache. Despite his quiet strength, despite his determination to maintain control over his own life, she could see the toll his condition was taking on him. It wasn't just the physical symptoms, which were becoming more apparent with time, but the emotional weight of knowing that his future was uncertain. She had never imagined that her life would become so intertwined with his. But as the days passed, Emily found herself growing more and more attached to Alex. She cared for him deeply, in ways she hadn't thought possible. He had let her in, and she wasn't about to turn away from him now. They spent their evenings together, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking about everything and nothing at all. There were no more walls between them, no more pretending. Just two people trying to make sense of the time they had left, however long or short that might be. One evening, as they sat on the balcony, watching the city lights twinkle below, Alex turned to her. Emily, he said softly, his voice low and serious. I've been thinking about the future. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had been thinking about it too, wondering where they were headed, wondering how much time they had left. What about it? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Alex hesitated, his gaze drifting out to the horizon. I don't want you to be tied down to me, not like this, he said quietly. I've seen how much you've given up, how much you've had to adjust to my situation. I don't want you to feel like you're stuck, like you're sacrificing your own life for me. Emily reached for his hand, holding it tightly in hers. Alex, I'm not stuck, she said softly. I'm right where I want to be. With you. He looked at her, his eyes searching hers for any hint of doubt. But there was none. She meant it. She had made a choice, and that choice was to be with him, no matter what came next. But I don't want you to feel like you have to stay out of obligation, Alex insisted. I know how hard this is for you. I don't want you to feel burdened by me. Emily shook her head. I don't feel burdened, Alex. I feel honored. Honored to be here with you, honored to be a part of your life, no matter how difficult things get. He was quiet for a moment, as if processing her words. Then, he squeezed her hand and smiled. Thank you, he said, his voice filled with gratitude. You have no idea how much that means to me. Emily smiled back, a warmth filling her chest. We're in this together, remember? Whatever happens, we face it together. The words hung in the air between them, a promise, an unspoken bond that had been forged in the quiet moments, in the moments of honesty and vulnerability. As the night went on, Emily leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing beside her. She didn't know what the future held for them, but she knew that whatever happened, they would face it together. And for now, that was enough. As the weeks passed, the reality of Alex's condition continued to cast a shadow over their lives, but Emily had come to accept it. It wasn't easy, there were good days, and there were harder days, days when Alex's symptoms would flare up unexpectedly, or when his exhaustion would leave him retreating into silence. But through it all, Emily remained by his side, unwavering. She had never imagined that this is where her life would take her, but now that she was here, there was no turning back. Every day brought new challenges, but also new moments of connection. Alex had stopped pushing her away. He had let down his walls, allowing her into places he had once kept locked away. In return, Emily had opened her heart fully to him, letting go of the fear that had once held her back. She was no longer just pretending to be his wife, she was his partner, his confidant. And with every passing day, their bond grew stronger. One afternoon, as they sat together in the living room, Emily noticed the way Alex was staring out the window, his gaze distant, his hand resting loosely on his knee. She could tell that he was lost in thought, weighed down by something. Alex, she said softly, her voice cutting through the silence. He turned to her, his expression softening. Hey, he said, his voice quiet. What's on your mind? Emily asked, her eyes searching his face for answers. Alex hesitated before speaking, his words slow and deliberate. I've been thinking a lot about the future, he said, his tone heavier than usual. About what comes next. I know I'm not getting any better, and I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. The weight of his words hit Emily like a physical blow. She knew that this moment was inevitable, that they would eventually have to face the reality of his condition. But hearing him say it out loud made everything seem so much more real, so much more immediate. Alex, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. We've been through so much already. I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure this out. Together. He looked at her, his eyes filled with an emotion that was hard to read. I don't want you to feel like you have to carry this burden alone, he said softly. I know it's hard. And I know it's not fair to you. Emily reached out and took his hand in hers, holding it firmly. You're not a burden, Alex, she said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. You're not. You never have been. For a moment, they sat in silence, their hands intertwined. Emily's heart ached at the thought of losing him, of facing a future without him by her side. But in that moment, she knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. After a while, Alex broke the silence, his voice quieter now. I've been thinking about the possibility of taking some time off, he said. Not for treatment, but just for us. To spend time together. I don't want to waste any more time. Emily's eyes filled with emotion at his words. I think that's a good idea, she said softly. We deserve to make the most of the time we have, however much or little that may be. The thought of taking time for themselves, of focusing solely on the present and the moments they had left, filled Emily with a sense of peace. It was a small step in a long journey, but it was a step in the right direction. Together, they would make the most of every single moment. And no matter what the future held, they would do it side by side. The days that followed felt different, quieter somehow, as if the world had slowed down just for them. Emily and Alex had decided to take the time he had suggested, to spend their days together, not worrying about the future but cherishing the present. They had come to terms with the fact that the road ahead was uncertain, but they were no longer afraid of facing it. There were still moments of sadness, moments when Alex's pain would become too much for him to hide, but those moments were few and far between. When they did come, Emily was there, a constant source of support and comfort. They would sit together, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking about everything and nothing, but always together. It was during one of these quiet evenings that Alex turned to her, his face serious but soft. "Emily," he said, his voice low. "I don't want to leave you with regrets. I want to make sure you know how much you mean to me." Emily felt her heart tighten at his words. "Alex," she whispered, reaching out to take his hand. "There's nothing I regret. I've had more than I ever thought possible with you." His eyes softened, but there was still a trace of doubt there, a concern that he might be holding her back, that he might not be able to give her everything she deserved. "I'm not the man I was," he said quietly. "I know that. I can't give you a future, and that breaks my heart." Emily shook her head, her voice firm. "You are the man I love," she said softly, "and that's all I need. Whatever comes next, I'll be with you. I promised, didn't I?" He nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I'm glad you're here," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've made this time so much easier, Emily. I don't know how to thank you for that." She smiled back, the warmth in her chest spreading. "You don't have to thank me," she replied. "This is where I want to be." And she meant it. Every moment, every day they spent together was a gift. They didn't know what the future held, but that didn't matter. They had each other now, and that was enough. As the weeks passed, their time together grew more precious. There were still tough days, days when Alex's health would take a turn for the worse, but Emily stayed by his side through it all. She never left. One afternoon, as they were sitting on the couch, Alex's head resting on her shoulder, he looked up at her, a faint smile on his lips. "You know, I never thought I'd be able to have a moment like this," he said quietly. "I always thought I'd be alone in this." Emily's heart ached at the vulnerability in his voice. "You're not alone," she whispered, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "You never were, Alex." They spent the rest of the afternoon together, wrapped up in the quiet comfort of each other's presence. And even as the days grew shorter, even as the future seemed more uncertain than ever, Emily knew one thing for sure: love, in its purest form, was all they needed. They had made the most of the time they had, and whatever happened next, they would face it together, with no regrets, no fear, just the promise of being there for each other until the very end. I'm sure you'll love these millionaire stories that capture the essence of love, vulnerability, and unexpected connections. In these millionaire stories, a man of great wealth, Dr. Alexander Hunter, is faced with a secret condition that threatens to unravel his life, but he finds solace in a woman, Emily Bennett, who agrees to pretend to be his wife. As their relationship deepens beyond the superficial, these millionaire stories explore the complexities of love when everything feels uncertain. What happens when two people come together, both bearing their own burdens, yet choosing to face the future together, regardless of what may come? Through moments of emotional rawness and vulnerability, this collection of millionaire stories takes us on a journey of growth, heartache, and the beauty of discovering what truly matters. Emily, who initially agreed to the charade for convenience, finds herself falling for a man she never expected to care for, making these millionaire stories not just about money, but about the genuine human connections that transcend wealth. As their bond grows stronger, so do the challenges, but in the end, these millionaire stories remind us that sometimes the most valuable treasures are not found in riches, but in the love shared between two people who are willing to stand by each other's side through anything. In these unforgettable millionaire stories, we witness a journey that moves beyond appearances, with characters finding peace in the moments they share, knowing that no matter what the future holds, they'll face it together, side by side.